Western medicine is very mechanistic. You're the sum of your parts. It's like putting together a car. Put a carburetor here, cut this out, but let's just rebuild it. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. I'm like, we are not a machine.
I'm a standard practitioner. I do IVF and surgeries. And I noticed a lot of our patients would drop out of treatment because,
but the number of surgeons that text me on the daily asking for my advice on what to do with their patients would blow your fucking mind. In the mental health landscape, there is hands down no better way to eat than carnivore. I'm honored to be here. I'm happy to be here. I feel like I'm the black sheep of the carnivore community. I'm always like, why don't they like ignore me? Like, I think they hate me because I sell peptides. I don't know. It's a very strange space.
well, I'm the black sheep of the fertility world.
Oh, listen, honey, you're a physician. If you guys, I have so many physician friends who have been so blackballed, and we're like, welcome to the dark side. We'll take you. It's okay, honey. We got you. We know they hate you.
Well, you're not a real doctor. But ultimately now I'm learning that real doctors are all propaganda. We've just been brainwashed.
I love when people say that because I'm always like, but the number of surgeons that text me on the daily asking for my advice on what to do with their patients would blow your fucking mind.
Well, I used to think my best friend, my good friend Steve, was crazy as a chiropractor, and I'm thinking, nuts. And then my other friend Craig taught me about meditation and prayer, and then I brought acupuncture, massage into our practice, and in order to help people because it's also stressful. Well, I appreciate you, and you're a big deal to me because I was watching you and I was like, who is this gal? She is amazing. She tells it like it is. And there were some similarities when you mentioned your father in jail. And I'm like, my father was in jail. And you grew up in Detroit. I grew up in LA. I think that was part of the story. And then you had mentioned about carnivore, and I know you do have a lot of depth, much more than just that. And that's why I was really interested in listening and learning from you and how those that are in our communities called human beings around the world, and social media is the new social medicine. But
I love that.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful phrase.
This is the change. And what you're doing and what you're experiencing and how you could be present in helping people. And I'm just curious a little bit about just your basic story as a beautiful human being that suffered and how it strengthened you.
Okay.
And again, we could go wherever you want and don't want. You could say, Kiltz, I'm done. Not today, another day. Don't ever worry about that.
Okay.
Literally. Okay. I'm very serious.
No. Yeah. And it's interesting because when you grow up with a certain level of, like, it's your normal, right? Like, I don't know exactly your story, but you're like, if you are get in the streets and in a gang, in some situations, father in prison and stuff like that, that leads to a certain way of being. Well, there was a certain level of normalcy to how I grew up. So I didn't think of any of it as trauma or traumatic or hard. And I just had a lot of energy in me. Like, I don't want pity. Like, that look of pity in someone's eyes, like it would enrage me as a child, right? Like, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I'm not asking for your pity. I don't need you to feel sorry for me. I got it, So to me, kind of grew up with what would, had the trauma, big T, little t, like I wasn't raped, like I wasn't abducted and kidnapped. I wasn't molested that I'm aware of. But knowing what I know now and how I, specialize and help people recover from trauma and all my therapeutic, interventions and certifications, I'm like, I learned to harden around it, calcium shell it and put on a very good warrior front, knew how to, I did have a very strong, resilient nervous system that could handle a lot as a child, blessed with very good mitochondria, apparently. But now I can look at it and go, oh, my minimizing and diminishing some of this is actually not helping me. It's not actually helping the people I work with, because my standards of what I expected people and my patients to be able to do, I was comparing them maybe to me. Like, I don't understand what's going, like, this is not that big of it. Like, come on, right? So looking back at it, at 52 years old that I am, and in the midst of right now, for me, going through for me is real trauma. Like, I'm a real big T trauma, dealing with a recent loss and grief. It's like causing such a contraction and expansion simultaneously that I can look kind of at my childhood a little bit differently. So I say that to say, I didn't look at it like it was rough. I'm like, what? My childhood was awesome. But, street fights and bricks in the head and chains wrapped around and getting jumped was like the norm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And carrying a gun at 12 to be able to walk to the baseball field to play baseball was the norm. They're like, girl, you're going to have a gun, because if 7 Mile Crew rolls up on us, you have to be ready.
Yeah.
And so I grew up inner city Detroit. My mom was married to my dad. He was part of a bank robbery gang and robbed a lot of banks, and ended up, when my mom was pregnant with me, FBI coming in with pictures like, is this your husband? And, my mom is born again Christian, very devout. My house is Bibles and baby Jesus everywhere. And that was like the most mortifying moment for her. So knowing what I know about, in utero trauma, developmental PTSD, and understanding how the mother and the baby it is one, can you imagine? My mom had 3 children under 7 and pregnant with me, and her husband robs a bank, and they were just, both high school graduates, and, just jobs, blue collar types. He was working and she wasn't, in Detroit back when you could buy a house with her mortgage was like $173.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So back when you could do that, you could be a taxi man and, still pay your bills, work on the line in Detroit or whatever. So through all that, I just went to prison. I was visiting prison my whole life. And, but we were raised in a shroud of lying, and shame that was very, very deep for my mother, about like, you can't let anybody know who your father is. Like, you can't do that. Like, what? So, and my mother is Indian, East Indian, and Black. And there's a lot of shame around the color. So there's a lot of lying about what our race was, and then finally when I met my great grandmother, I'm like, she's Black. I'm like, wait, are we Black? I don't understand what's going on here. Like, there was so much lying and shame. My mother's mother was raped. Her mother was a child of rape. It was just, all the Black women were raped, basically. And some of them were able to pass. My grandmother was fairer than me, but she was half Black. And so there's like this cultural shame. There's lots of rape over there. I do kind of believe in impactual genetic handing down of some of this. And so some of this was kind of put upon me. But the fighting and the survival, and it just seemed like that was the normal thing in my neighborhood, right? This was how it was done. So I don't know, it didn't seem like that big a deal. It seemed like going to get to prisons and getting frisked all the time, and only being able to hug and kiss your daddy, when you could say hello and leave. And this was like how it was. But there was a lot around that lying problem that I had. And then I would be in the neighborhood and I was allowed to pop somebody in the face and choke them out and put a brick to their head. But at school, my mom got us into private Catholic schools in a very wealthy neighborhood with all white people. And I couldn't do that. So to be able to, switch, like to go from, I have to punch you, there's no talking. And I was a target because I was a small, little, skinny, light-skinned girl. And it was a lot of, she's not white, she's Indian. It's like, she's not Black, she's Indian. So I learned you can't be white, you can't be Black, apparently to different people. And then my mom was like, well, the Indians are not going to like you either because you don't speak the language. And then I found out real quick, the Indians didn't like me either because I wasn't Indian enough. They'd call me an Oreo, brown on the outside, white on the inside. So I'm like, okay. So it was a very bizarre place of never fitting in and dealing with a lot of roughneck type of whatever. And I just chose to be like, I'm not going to be afraid. And so if it means I have to fight, if somebody's going to come up to the thing, I'm like, we got to do this again. They're like, they're calling you out. You know, you got to do it. I'm like, and I hated it. I hated fighting. I hated hitting people in the face. I hated choking them out. But I was taught very young how to be like, listen, you got to reach. You know, you got to go with your arm length. You know, and everyone's trachea is real soft. So show them what you got, right? So all of that aggression and fighting and war, and I end up hanging out with drug dealers all the time, drug dealers, and gun runners. And they were kind of my first foray into teaching me about abundance, though. Loyalty and abundance. They had such a mindset around abundance and money. They're like, baby girl, don't worry about it. We just go get more money tomorrow. I was like, what? They're like, it's okay. It's just money. They're like, it's just, so when 17-year-olds are teaching you at 12 and 13, it's just money. It's just energy. This is what they were talking about in the hood to me. Very, very interesting. But, you know, I was shooting Uzis off in a alley at 12 and 13 years old. I did carry a Glock. I did carry a Tech 9 to be able to go play baseball. I've had guns in my face many times. And it's like, it was like that. Bitch, please. Are you going to fucking shoot me? I mean, that's at 13 and 14 years old. That's what I was doing.
Wow. Wow.
You know, so it's kind of like, it just was, I don't know. I'm a very soft, sensitive person, actually. And so as I got older and developed my spirituality, my consciousness, I allowed myself to develop into the softness of what I had to kind of cover up how I was to tolerate those kind of worlds that I was in.
Well, how did you I mean, I don't know if the right word is transition or just we all evolve anyway, but to become the healer. And I listened to some of your stories about injuries and meeting a chiropractor. And I'm just curious in how you evolved to sort of the healer and how that has affected your life.
Yeah, I think I was just born that way. I would operate on injured worms at 3 years old. I had a bug hospital. So my mom let me have aquariums. So we lived on a canal, water in Detroit, it's water everywhere. I would have crawfish and garter snakes and bugs and all kinds of things. She was like, what are you doing? I'm like, mommy, but blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I would remember taking like little thorns thinking, oh, his guts are out, and trying to save them off the sidewalk. Birds would fall and hit, and I would try to like get them to, you know what I mean? I've done mouth to mouth on dogs before. I was just always out there doing that. And it just was my natural way of being. And so I don't know if that came from when I discovered, you know, all my friends' daddies were doctors, and that's what rich people were doctors. So I'm going to be a doctor. But I did naturally, my natural fit probably would have been a veterinarian. I used to say I wanted to be a bug scientist. I didn't know what they were called. So I was like, I'm going to be a bug scientist. Very strange child. But it turned to all animals, all life, you know, like, yeah. I crushed a cocoon once accidentally at 6, and I was literally devastated, sobbing. I had nightmares for like 20, 30 years over that. I had to like be processed in therapy over my guilt of killing a butterfly. Like, that's how sensitive I was very, very young. So I always wanted to be helpful. I always wanted to fix the broken and the wounded or whatever. And then strong desire to rescue my dad, really, to free him from the unjustness that befallen him. So I wanted to be an attorney, I thought. And my father hated attorneys and police all law enforcement, right? So once you find that out, you're like, but I'm doing it to get you out. But he's like, he hates them. He doesn't respect them. So what else? But you know what I mean? So it still was that. And I eventually, that is still what drives me, is trying to keep people with mental health issues out of prison from making bad choices, from becoming alcoholics and drug addicts. And because I watched how it trickled down to my brothers and how they were in prison and drug addicts and alcoholics. And so I always had that in me. It's just this drive to help. I just felt so strongly I didn't want to be worthless. What I was doing as a child, I'll tell you, I was justifying. I lived in tremendous guilt. I thought I ruined my family. The story I made up, nobody told this to me. I made this up, that my dad felt pressure, that my mother was on the pill, and your fertility doctor. I wasn't supposed to be here.
Right.
So I was a mistake. I lived my whole childhood with, I ruined it. I stole their dad. Because daddy wouldn't have robbed the bank.
Yeah.
If she didn't accidentally get pregnant with me.
Wow.
So I felt I ruined my family before I was even born. So there was a lot in my childhood, and it wasn't about 9 years old finally when I kind of learned or made the decision, if I'm going to not want to die all the time, I'm not a mistake, then I'll prove it to you. I'm not a fucking mistake. You know, like I'll go in here and I'll reclaim everything for the family, and I will take shame off our name. So I'll go get it. Don't worry, mommy. I'll get you out of here. It was like that. That's where it was really kind of driven from, is from my own shame.
Yeah. I wonder, I've come to the opinion that our body and mind damages, disabilities, however you want to label them, it is really caused by the environment that we've been forced into. We're in essence slave soldiers, peasants, and prisoners.
Yeah.
And the lifestyle we're all sort of forced to live in some way. And especially, I believe our diet is a deadly diet that causes schizophrenia, suicidality, depression, anxiety, criminality, and I'll go down the list. And so we're blaming people for their misdeeds and misjudgment, when in fact it's no different than if you have heart damage or any other organ system or cancer. And we're in the modern medical system, we're working to fix it with a drug or some psychotherapy or something, electroshock, when in fact the cause of the diseases we're suffering from, I believe, are all secondary to plant protein, low animal fat diet. And it's hard to get out of that because that's the standard we've all sort of been living in for thousands, and certainly over the last 100 or so years. What are your thoughts on that crazy concept?
So I would agree with a lot of it. I probably would expand a bunch of stuff like esoterically and spiritually and frequency into that. But that is absolutely one of the biggest messages I am trying to explain to people of 30 years of doing this, is all mental health issues are brain disorders. They are brain-based disorders. This is a physical, structural issue. And that could be, and we have structural things that can do it, but structure is deeply impacted by the metabolic chaos that people are in from what they eat. And I consider what you consume everything. It's not just what you put in your mouth, right? It's the light, it's the sound, it's the movement, it's the people, it's everything. So as I, year after year, decade after decade, expanded my understanding of what nutrition is and what junk food is, it's not just what you put in your mouth, it's everything. And I lean more towards electromagnetics medicine, which is harnessing, reproducing nature to help do correction. So I like to do the sound, electrical. I'm very there, not chemical. So, medicine is chemistry. You're some bag of chemicals. And if we just start adding Xanax and Prozac and we're going to change some chemicals. Now, there's not real serotonin receptor issues. It's not like there's serotonin and dopamine and GABA problems and anandamide and endocannabinoid issues. Absolutely. But that's so downstream kind of from what really is the source of it. And that's, to me, the brain and the nervous system. So that's where I became very, very, very interested. I went down a genetics pathway for a long time. Everybody in the autism world does that. I think that's a big distraction. I don't think it's really as much as it's cracked up to be. So the food, because everybody has to do it, is a very big part of it. But then my job is to expand and explain, food is just captured light, you guys. And we have to make this all make sense. And why do you even eat? I'm like, because you're trying to grab hydrogen and nitrogen. And why are you in the sun? So to me, that's all super important, even though people are obsessed with food. And although food has been a massive part of my practice, I want to help them understand there's other things you're gonna have to do too. And especially if I have something like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or suicidal ideation, I'm like 9 times out of 10, it's not just the diet, it's just the food that's going to do the issue. Like we have to change several things. The relationship with light, the sleep, like sleep cycles, is just, it gets so out of whack with people struggling with mental health issues, with brain disorders, right? Brain inflammation causes everything to go into chaos. So food and the types of diets have been a very, very, very big part of my practice, even though the training I went, and I kind of fell into it accidentally because I was trained from Abram Hoffer, a Canadian psychiatrist, and orthomolecular psychiatry and that whole lineage. And schizophrenia was like his big mainstay, and bipolar. This man could cure all of it. He was a genius, and he trickled down and taught everybody what to do. And it was like at 76 or 78, he turned in his psychiatric card to the Canadian Association. He's like, you guys are the biggest group of morons. I've laid out to you exactly how to cure all of these, and you can cure. Stop saying you can't, and yet you still ignore it. You're idiots. So I don't want to be one of you anymore. So he had just cojones for days, man. I so love Abram Hoffer. I think he's a name that everybody should know. So, but he didn't talk about diet that much. He was still a physician, and he still looked at it like using nutrients, kind of like drugs, to come in there and impact the pathway. So it started me in that process. And I kind of accidentally would discover, when I would make these dietary massive changes, how insanely critical it was. And for me, in the mental health landscape, there is hands down no better way to eat than carnivore, period. And there's many, many scientific reasons for it, but it's always the best results. Always.
I evolved in this medical field. So I'm a standard practitioner. I do IVF and surgeries. And I noticed a lot of our patients would drop out of treatment because they were depressed or it was just too hard emotionally. And I began to introduce meditation, prayer, acupuncture, massage, chiropractic ideas into the practice. And some of my patients were getting pregnant on a diet called paleo. I'm like, huh. And that kind of took me down. This was probably 20 years ago, down the paleo, keto, and finally carnivore world. So I kind of offer all these things and talk about them. And there's so much about all of these diets. And for me, I found that carnivore is like the very best. I had depression, anxiety, ADHD, OCD, arthritis, psoriasis, migraine. I just go down the list. And at carnivore almost 15 years ago, bam, all gone. And it's like, okay, why? And one of the things that I don't know if you talk much about goitrogenic foods.
Oh, yeah, I do and I don't. I mean,
here's
I know what they are. I just get rid of all the plants for people.
Right. But I think for people just understand that those things cause thyroid damage. Might they cause damage to your brain and every other cell of your body? And recognizing as you light, electromolecular energy. I mean, we're just a battery, and we transmit and communicate. And plants are live organisms that communicate with everything.
Yeah.
And you mentioned energetics, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about that in healing humanity.
Okay. Well, I'm going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to say why the carnivore, like they don't know. I think it's pretty obvious. I think we have two big factors as to why this is well, let's say three, three big factors. The simplest, right? We're dealing with the metabolic chaos and the insulin, the chronically high insulin and the derangements and the plaquing up and things being inflamed and sticky. And then on a brain map and a QEG, that's all this high beta. And, it's inflamed, you guys. If it's on fire, you're not going to work real well. Okay. So like, it's literally, we call it brain on fire. You can look at certain scans and go, well, that's the ring of fire right there. I mean, they can't function at all. Right. So you have the metabolic chaos, you have insulin control and the hormones and the neurotransmitters. Everything just works better because we've put water on the fire. Right. Then, ketones are extraordinary, and make no mistake, carnivore is a daily cyclical ketogenic diet. You don't have to track a macro. You don't have to shove fat down your face. You will go into ketosis every single night like you're supposed to. Your brain's going to detox and dump like it's supposed to. You know what I mean? Like, you're good. Like, don't worry about it. Every night's a winter. Every day is like the summer. You're good to go. Enjoy your food. You don't have to fast and all that kind of stuff. So it's so simple. Deuterium depletion, I think, gets underrated, and I think that for mental health issues is one of the most important things, even more than the ketones, even more than the activation of the prefrontal cortex and turning off the amygdala and the reactive lizard brain. I think they work hand in hand. I have found through, really studying, mitochondria and hydrogen and deuterium, and doing multiple things for deuterium depletion with my patients, and looking how deuterium is so involved in depression and so involved in mania, so involved in psychosis. It's off the charts. It is way easier to regulate and infertility. So I've had patients, like, I'm no infertility expert, but I get a lot of people pregnant because I understand zinc and hormones. I'm like, why don't we do this? Like, I'm just going to throw a couple things out there, And it works. I'm like, I'm not that magical, you guys. I'm just sorry your physicians are stupid. Like, I can't fix stupid, but I can tell you what to do, and let's see how it works. I went down the route of testing deuterium on people using the deuterium depleted water, which is very expensive and difficult, blah, blah, blah. But just don't eat the carnivore. You know what I mean? It just does that. And they put the light in, the sunlight and the grounding, maybe somebody have to use some red light panels, maybe we do some heat, but you heal that mitochondria, flood it with enough hydrogens and electrons, and let it do what it's designed to do, which it is designed to deplete all the deuterium, right? That's what it's trying to do. We just interrupted it with the Pop-Tarts and the Little Debbies and the beer and all the things, right? So when you start doing that and everything starts working and the mitochondria can come really back to life, the mitochondria are creating the energetic charge, right? Like that's how we're, what is charge? What is battery? It is aliveness. And so if someone's walking around as a 3 volt and they're supposed to be a 9 volt, well, how real easy to become schizophrenic like that, actually. So, and believe it or not, it is, because that can happen kind of easier than you think, and you can correct it easier than you think. And the deuterium depletion aspect of carnivore, coupled with all the ketones, coupled with waking up the proper parts of the brain that are so beautiful at compassion, empathy, mirror neurons, good impulse control, good decision making, quieting the ones that want to fight and go to war all the time. It just does it naturally. And then, as you know, it rips away the visceral fat and everything else that's just choking us, all the organs from working. And every organ has an emotional component to it. Like, you have to deal with the anger of the liver and the resentment of the gallbladder and the powerlessness of so I look at what every joint means, what every organ means. If you've had this problem, oh, you're, some of them are very obvious. Like, you're in heart failure. So you broke your own heart. Like, why do we have a broken heart? You know what I mean? Like some of them are like right in front of your face, right? I've had so many patients who were infertile. It's because they were former strippers and they carried tremendous shame, and they were lying to the husband. They didn't want anybody to know that's what they did or how they paid to get through grad school. I'm like, I don't care this is why you've had 4 miscarriages. We have to deal with what you're holding on to that you feel you don't deserve to be a mother, right? So that's where that all is as well. So to me, energy is just what we're really it's a physical biological factor as well. And when I tell people, listen, like the music is charging you that you listen to, the light you're in is charging you or tanking you, the people you hug or don't hug, the amount, what drives me crazy, and being that you've been in the sexual health realm, is so I get people, with a lot of mental illnesses, and like also like mold and Lyme and stuff like that, right? Because it's all concomitant with that. How like touch and intimacy and sex just goes out the door. Like, well, that's gone. Oh, I don't care if I ever do that again. I'm like, it's been 10 years. You haven't, what? Right? And they don't understand the power of even connection with humans and touching again. And I'm like, maybe your husband, you guys could just try pleasuring each other in a different way for a while. Like it's really quick how we ignore the things that are actually feeding and nurturing us.
Where does it go? Why does it go? It's what does mean it? What do you mean? Meaning that for so many people, all of us, we all live our life with stress and struggles and anger and sadness and holding on to yesterday with regret and judgment and missing the points about our spirituality and what are the things. I mean, it sounds like you take care of everything and anything, and that's kind of what we're here in medicine to do. And you've taken on a sort of a whole different direction than a standard doctor of chiropractic medicine. And how do you approach someone that's coming in with depression or schizophrenia or aches and pains or sexual dysfunction, infertility?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, I spend a lot of time. So first visit, it'll be 3 hours long. So I have to listen to everything. So I'm listening to not only what they say, what they put on the paper, what they're saying. I'm watching all the way they move. I do hear and see other things. I always did. I thought everybody could do that. I didn't understand them. Like, I thought we just didn't talk about it. So might sound crazy, but I have, I do see dead people. I do, I'm highly physically empathic. So I didn't know what that was. Like when I first started practicing and working, how I was always sick and I was worse. The more I worked, the more I helped people, which usually makes me feel good, I would feel worse. And so finally my mentors were explaining that, like, and I would say, like, what is it? Like literally people would walk in and I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I'm like, then I would do the whole thing and they would tell me, well, I have gallstones. But I'm like, yeah, you do. What the hell is, like there's a knife stabbing in me. So eventually I learned to know. I'm like, okay, so you have a left shoulder problem. Is it blah, blah, did you? They're like, how? I'm like, because mine's on fire. So I wouldn't always tell them that, but my body would feel everything. So I would know. I've seen and felt their rapes, their molestation. I would just, and so I've just been able to see that and be like, I need you guys to leave the room. I'm like, was it your father or your brother? And you were about 12. And then it's like, they freak out. I'm like, listen, I'm sorry. I just, I don't put this on my website, but, and who's Michael? Cause he's standing right here. Cause and he's telling me this to tell you, like, so I can't make that happen, but it happens all the time. So I worked very hard at building my antenna. So my brain, to me, I'm just a receiver of information, and I worked very hard on making my antenna as big as possible to capture as much information about that person before me to transmit it to them to when they were ready to know it. And I use all of that. So I can kind of see into the picture differently than other people. And I can I'm very circular and holographic in how I would see it. So sometimes I'm like, it's that. Like, did they ever ask you about this? So I think that was just given to me, and I've been able to make it a nice instrument for myself to help people. So I start there and I'm trying to go to the root cause. And to me, the root cause is always a disconnection at a spiritual level, like some chasm in their soul, authenticity, being able to express itself, and then maybe trying to live into someone else's values that were projected onto them. I don't start there telling them that, but we have to go through backtracking that. So I don't think food is actually the cause of everything. I don't think everything is from the gut. That's not what I think. I think it's coming from the soul. And I want to look at, well, where's the wound and where are they not listening to the beautiful feedback the physiology is giving them to help redirect them on their path. Right. So I come in and talk about that, and I talk about them, you know, I teach them, that's my thing. So yes, I deal with talking about food and I talk about light, but I just say it because you are really a being of light. You radiate light. I wish our eyes, I wish for like 5 minutes, we all had the capability of like really seeing the infrared and what's coming off of us, like who we really are. I go, and that's physical, you guys. I'm not talking esoterically strange. If you could actually see the magnetic pulse coming from your heart, if you could actually, you know, see this with everybody, you would see things very, very differently. And then you would recognize, you know, what I see in you, I see in me. And I'm not going to hate on you because then I'm hating on myself. I'm going to learn to love you. I'm going to learn, you know, I was taught, you know, to do a lot of inner child work and a lot of gestalts, and I can go and find anybody's inner child at any age, no matter the level of asshole I might be talking to right here. I'm like, but the 4-year-old in there is so damn adorable. This guy, God bless him. I'm like, you're the cutest little thing ever. So I can learn to do that and fall in love with anyone before me, no matter what type of chaos they're presenting to me. So that's where I go. I follow their psyche. And I'm a guide to occasionally judge it, but I don't want to direct them. I want to find out where do they go, and I want to follow it. And then when I have an opportunity to help it, there it is. And I watch them again, and then I support it. And that takes different avenues. Sometimes we can start in on the food. Great. Sometimes I have to deal with the brain first. You know, like I have to see where that person goes. Like, what do they really want? And then I always ask the same question to every patient. I'm like, so we have to do the whole thing. And I go, okay, so now I'm going to ask you the most important question. I go, what? Okay. So we're going to pretend, because I started doing it with all the autistic kids, but I do it with I'm like, this works great for adults too. I'm like, you're going to pretend I have a magic wand. So, and I'm like a physical. I'm like, it's a real wand. I can give you anything you want. You get 3 wishes. You can't ask for more wishes. Yeah, don't trick me, you know.
Oh boy.
What you want, right? I'm like, I can do anything. Let's just pretend. What if this is a real magic wand and I can do it? So I heard all you blah, blah, blah. I heard all these ABC names and labels. What? 3 wishes. And it's astonishing the things people will say then. Sometimes they're nothing to do with health, you know, and then it tells you everything you need to know about what that person really cares about, where their heart is. I've had some children say things literally bringing me to tears. I'm like, I want a new house for my mom because she works so hard. I mean, you're like literally we're crying. I'm like, oh my God, I love this child. And sometimes it'll just, I want to be able, you know, I would like to be able to win a spelling bee. Like to a dyslexic child, this is like everything, you know? So that's my favorite question. And then that's where I get the information on where they really want to go. And I follow them and help teach them how to get it.
Do you think that much of what we are taught in science and medicine is working to simply fix what's broken with the rapid pill shot or surgery, and forgetting that there's a dream inside there?
Yes. So that's what I would say is the difference between like medicine, Western medicine, like what you were trained in, and what I was trained in would be more Eastern, whether it's Chinese medicine, chiropractic, even, you know, homeopaths. Western medicine is very mechanistic. You're the sum of your parts. It's like putting together a car. You know, we'll put a carburetor here, cut this out, put this on. Well, the engine's not, well, let's just rebuild it. Well, if it doesn't, put on new tires, you know, like what? It'll work. And I'm a vitalist, and I'm like, no, that's not how it works. I'm like, we are not a machine. A human, a dog, everything, it's greater than the sum of its parts. There is some weird magical life force aliveness that does something, and animates it in a different way and coordinates and orchestrates in such a way we cannot comprehend. We still don't understand how the body makes a scab. I mean, we kind of were like, listen, there's some DC current, there's a little bit, but like we can't reproduce it. You know what I mean? We can't do it. There's magic to what the system is doing. So the vitalism concept is, I do believe in magic. You can't tell me a caterpillar becomes a big ball of snot and then turns into a butterfly, and that shit ain't magic. How is it not? So like everything I do, I made a baby. What? I made a whole human being from a cell. You know what I mean? That's insane. That's insanely powerful and incredible. And I think we forget how mystical we really are, how powerful we really are. And I think people, when that dream of who they want to be and what they want to do, what their life force was called into this avatar to do, gets destroyed, gets stolen, gets changed down, and they're slowly dying every day. Well, why would you expect them to behave well? Why would you expect them to do kind things? Why would you expect their body is doing what it's built to do, to make them uncomfortable, to give them feedback, to change direction. You don't dislike things for no reason. Like I don't, one of the worst things the physicians would always come to me with this, right? To do neurofeedback. And I remember this one ER doc, she said, and I listened to her say this. I said, so let me get it straight. What exactly is it? Why do you want to come and spend $6,000 and come and do 40 like 3 times a week and do neurofeedback? I don't really see what the problem is, like exactly. Well, because I want to be able to do the things that I don't want to do. What? I was like, let me give you a little lesson here. It's because she hated being an ER doc. She wanted to quit. She hated being a physician. So I finally was like, and it took months for her to admit all this and all the things, right? I was like, let me tell you something I learned from autistic children. One of the greatest things, the greatest lesson I've watched them teach me, every parent I've ever seen, they never do what they don't want to do. You can try to bribe an autistic child until you're blue in the face. They don't care. They're not trying to please you. They have no people pleasing. And I don't want to. Why don't you? Because I don't want to. That is all the reason that they ever need to tell you, because they listen to what's really driving them. No, I don't want to. That's it. That's not the way most children and people do things. They will do people pleasing and do it for their mommy, do it for their teacher, do it for their coach, do it for their priest, do it for everybody else, everybody but themselves, of what they really want to do. So how many people are walking around out there, Doc, that are attorneys or firefighters or police officers or teachers or doctors? They don't want to be that at all. They're married with 3 children. They're living straight or gay, and they're not the other, because they were pleasing mommy, pleasing daddy, pleasing the culture. This is my duty as an Indian. I have to be. I had friends crying in undergrad, in the Indian guys, they wanted to get, this one friend, he wanted to become a PhD in religion to be a college professor. That would have been seen as the family failure, because you have to go to medical school and be a surgeon like your daddy. No options. He brought it up. He was crying with me. He was like, Stephanie, I don't have a choice. Now, I was born in America, and I'm American. I'm very not East Indian. Like they were, but they were like going to have arranged marriages. So like, I cannot bring dishonor to my parents and disrespect them. I must get into medical school. And their grades were not good, so I was tutoring them. They're like, you don't understand. If I don't get an A on this test, they're pulling me out and sending me back to India, and I'm going to have to go to school there. I was like, wow. So you have all these people, right, that are not really living in a self-actualized way, because they're living for other people and their values, and that crushes the soul. And that shows up in physical body ailments and illnesses, because it's trying to help you course correct. It's a gift. All the symptoms and pains and aches and diagnoses are a great gift. There's no derangement to what the body is doing, right? We just don't know how to listen properly. So I think there's a huge difference between the way I have always seen it and the way Western medicine has seen it. I'm like, I don't like the way you guys do things. You just like throw people away. You spend 7 minutes with them. You don't get to the root of anything. And again, I used to think it was like, food and pathogens and infections. And I'm at a whole nother level around all that now. So
Where does spirituality and our religious cultural beliefs that we've lived for hundreds, if not thousands of years take us?
This can get tricky. Religion can be a very big builder of kind of the dungeon programming and slave thinking for people, unfortunately. It can bring great comfort and relief for people too. But you have a lot of, I see it restricting, I have a lot of Hindus. I have a lot of Orthodox Jew patients, lots of Muslims. And I have to deal with those, like, we just have massive dietary restrictions. We have massive, I'm like, do you know how hard it is to recover an autistic child who doesn't eat red meat and they want to do lentils all the time? And who has an oxalate level of 500 on an organic acid test. And I'm like, this is nothing but curry and turmeric happening all day. I was like, ooh, you're not going to like me right now, but I need to make some changes, right? So it's a process. You have the Seventh-day Adventists, so you have whole religions that preach veganism, and they're in charge of the food pyramid and the whole, American Dietetic Associate, that whole thing. So it plays a lot into it. And I was a vegan for 12 years because of those beliefs and thinking I wanted to be spiritual, right? I wanted to be closer to God. And so I didn't want to kill. And I had to deal with the reality of, well, you're killing something. I'm sorry, but the broccoli's still screaming because it has consciousness as far as and then we've actually tested it now. They do scream. Yep. Plants are screaming and talking with each other and sending signals and all kinds of things, right? You're like, oh my God, this is a whole nother level, right? And I had to just accept I lived in a construct that, for whatever reason, this construct is designed to live, you must kill things. That's where we're at. And this avatar as a human being is a highly evolved scavenger that needs to be a carnivore. That, we can get away with some other stuff, but we eat rotten dead things. Like, that's what we do, and we're designed to do it like a wolf or a vulture. And that's a very weird thing to understand after 12 years vegan. But I will say, vegans, being in that culture for a long time, they're the most spiritually disconnected group of people. There's so much self-hate, disdain for other humans, lack of compassion, inability to connect, because you're so deranged. Your brain is really so deranged and so depressed, and everyone's lying to themselves and lying to each other about it. I've never felt more connected to nature, to people, to a oneness with all that is, after being, I think I'm like 8 years carnivore now or something, but it happened pretty quickly. I felt like my brain completely lit up in a completely different way. And once I got my judgments that were put upon me from the religions and from the culture, then it was, I let myself, like, what is really guiding me from inside, not from internal, from external. So I think it's a huge thing. I think, unfortunately, it plays a lot into, I am not a fan of getting my dietary advice from old books that were put together by some behind the doors Vatican councils that, no thanks. So, and I get people put a lot of stock in it. Well, so, like, I don't care what that says, because again, it was written by a bunch of people and then sat there and edited and manipulated for a very specific reason. So it gets tricky with that. And then people feeling they have to, again, they're living for the priest. My grandfather was a reverend, a Baptist, Southern Baptist Reverend Robert Jr. And my other grandfather was Muslim. So talk about the dichotomy of that.
Yeah.
So it's a lot what people hear from the pulpit, basically, and what the decisions they'll make about who they're supposed to be. And, they're not thinking about making themselves proud. They're thinking about these other people or externals or organizations. And it catches up to them. And then they do all these behind the scenes deviant things for themselves,
In approaching someone with mental, physical disorders. Is there a place really sort of in modern medicine? And how can we begin to integrate this philosophy of Eastern and Western in a better way, do you think?
I think there's a lot. I've been incredibly encouraged by how many physician friends of mine in some of the, in like the more regenerative medicine spaces that are now going to what we call, they're calling it consciousness medicine. Like they don't even want to talk about it like even in that. And they are looking at energetics, and there's so many different devices now that are helping look at kind of like your energetic field, your auric field. There's biofeedback technologies that I have been really amazed how many physicians I've seen exploring them and offering. Now they're always usually in places like Vail, I mean, like where all the big money is or whatever. But typically what the gateway for them was like psychedelics. The gateway was ketamine therapy or something, and them seeing how, whoa, wait a minute. And they would have their own experiences, or they would do some other shamanic journeys or drumming. They would usually have an experience, like all of us that are in the anti whatever crowd. We all had an experience. Most of us got injured or sick or something, and we have an overcome story, and that's what put us here. You've never, it always shocks me with like people want to say things like the autism community. You do know all those mothers got to the anti-vax status because they watched their child be injured, right? Like there was a thing that happened. She didn't wake up one day, read a book and say, this is what I'm gonna do. She's dealing with changing a diaper on a 12-year-old. Like, yeah. And there's pain that that you can drive if you choose into purpose. So a lot of these, I've been very impressed. Now I don't see it. I'm not hopeful this is going to happen like at an institutional level, but I think watching how many are having the courage to say it and to do it. Like, listen, I've been a quack for 30 years. I'm used to being told I'm a moron. You're an idiot. You're not a real doctor, da, da, da. I know it takes tremendous courage for a traditional physician to start jumping out and saying, I'm not going to prescribe a statin. I'm going to go to, the holistic conference. I'm going to look at exosomes. I'm going to look into stem cells. I'm going to look into ozone therapy. Like I'm going to, like even just therapies that don't really have spiritual implications. You're the wackadoodle now. Like I've seen my friends go through this. I'm like, oh boy. They're like, they don't like it. They're like, they hate me now because I deal with peptides and I won't give blood pressure medication because I'm trying to help them lose weight. Like the fact that you get made fun of because you want to help people lose weight by teaching them to exercise and lift weights blows my mind. So you guys have a lot of pressure internally. And with your guidelines, I'm a little bit come from a culture, all the doctors that I'm with, we're all kind of the same. We're all, we learned a lot of nutrition. I was taught tons of it, and went through all of it from learning about vegan to, paleo, autoimmune paleo. So carnivore wasn't talked about. That's a little bit avant-garde, but I think we're going to start seeing more and more of it. But I don't foresee Harvard or Stanford or Yale or any of, Brown suddenly converting to jumping onto the right side of things. But I think so many, because of social media, and as I loved how you said earlier, social medicine, like it's getting the message out where, it's like I heard somebody in an interview recently talking, and like mentioned Chris Palmer or whatever. And I'm like, God, you guys, because you guys don't do the psychiatric stuff. There are dozens of people you are not mentioning, dozens and dozens who came before him that don't get any credit, because most of the people who are doing this are hiding. Everybody's a little secret tucked away. You're like, well, he doesn't have a web. I mean, literally the guy who trained me for 30 years, like there was no website. Dude was 80 something years old. He's like, I don't need people to find. I mean, he made it so hard to find him. He's like, I don't need to have a front. He says, I'm full enough, because all the doctors referred to him. So he was like hidden. So nobody in the world knows who this guy is. He's one of the greatest doctors that ever lived, ever walked Earth. Nobody knows him. There's a lot of that, right?
None of this is new. It's all ancient.
Right.
And we're obviously just sort of talking about it. And someone said to me they didn't quote a paper because it was too old. And I'm like, wait a minute, you wouldn't quote a paper because it was too old, it wasn't recent. And the
It was
problem is
probably a pure paper. It was before corporate bias and greed and, you know, all the conflict of interest. That's when they actually did real observation.
would you say, and I agree with you, by the way, that I think mindset is, I always tell people, you gotta touch the mind first, and you gotta make some changes there, whether it's keto, carnivore, whatever the diet is, or the other, you gotta work here in the mindset. And
But that's hard to do when you're inflamed and deranged.
100%. And that's
Like
why I one is, if you're in a negative space all the time, you got to move yourself, you got to listen and think differently, but you also have to change and reduce the inflammation that's systemic in our bodies. And Laszlo Boros, I don't know if you know Laszlo Boros.
of
Yeah,
course.
I thought so. Deuterium
How else do
depletion.
we know about deuterium?
Well, that's why I was like, I had to mention Laszlo's name.
Yeah, I've interviewed him and talked to him. Like, yeah, he's
Another superstar, and I'm a little crazy on the glycocalyx, the
I mean,
glycobiome.
listen, oh, it's so funny because I was talking about it and they go, Dr. Kinsler, I'm like, yes. You know, because that's the first thing like, well, do you know what the glycocalyx is? I'm like, ask your cardiologist. Come back to me after that conversation. Yeah.
Well, I think that's what like really attracted me to you in so many more ways, is because between deuterium and the glycocalyx and just your energy to share health and wellness for all of us. And I do believe all of us have it in our DNA, but it's been epigenetically, environmentally, energetically misaligned. And so we've been going to standard medical practices where the cost is rising, the disease burden is on the rise. We're sicker and sicker, and we've got to do something different. In just kind of a couple more minutes, what's your sort of dream world of that?
My dream world.
Yeah.
It is saying abolishing all medical schools. It's like, I would love, I mean, you know, it's a tough thing to figure out. How are we going to destroy what is? Because that leads to a lot of chaos and anarchy, right? To rebuild. So I am not interested in fixing the system. I am very interested in building something new. So then people have a choice. I am not here to be an evangelical. I am not here to convert you. I am too old for that shit. I'm not doing it anymore. So what would you say to a vegan? I don't give a shit. I don't need to talk to the vegan. That's what I would say. Bye. You know, like if they come into the I had one today. I was like, literally went, how'd this guy get on my schedule? He's been a vegan until 6 months ago. Well, he's been following me. I'm like, he's drinking sea moss. I'm like, oh boy, I'm not real sure this is going to be a thing. Like, is this a mistake? And it turns out it was from a high level referral. I'm like, oh, you came from so-and-so. I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, you do know what's going to happen here, right? I was just like, I don't want to feel like you got a catfish moment. He's like, I'm going to let you know last week I had a steak. I went, oh, okay.
Okay, a little in.
Yeah. So like, as long as they're willing to change, but I'm not going to talk. I'm not trying to convert. I have zero desire. So I would rather the people who are like, listen, this is what we're doing. You want to lock arms and let's build the new. Fantastic. If they want to stick in that disease, sick care, death fighting system, knock yourself out at this point. I don't really care to come in, and I would love it if it was gone, but I just think the Rockefellers and everything that has been established and the pharma thing, it's so big. The amount of money and power that's over there, I think it's a war that's going to be lost. I just think if they just start losing customers and we just make our own things and we focus on, like, let's build it how we want it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have a house, you're like, listen, we just need to napalm that house. The mold, the spiders, the things, it's not good. Blow it up, start over. Now, you know, but if we blow it up, you have a lot of people who would be completely lost. And so they are so in that programming, they're not going to be able to evolve out of it. So unfortunately, They want to go get their chemo. They want to do their mammograms. They believe that this is the way to do it. We want birth control pills for everything. Like, okay, take your opioids over there. I would like to focus on building new with the people who are interested in that and kind of starting over and just allowing the two worlds to be here simultaneously until eventually we're like, were there people over there? Like, I almost feel like I live in that now. Like I live in my own world and other things have happened. I'm like, where did those people go? I'm like, I don't remember. Like, I don't care. I don't want to see them. I don't want to know about it. You're going to make you're getting on your 7th booster. I could care. I don't want to know about you. You're not in my circle anymore. You're not welcome. That's kind of where I'm at. And my people, we just live over here. Like, do people really do that still? That's always kind of like, I had no idea. They still do that? Wow. I don't know. They're not in my consciousness. They're not in my circle. I don't want to deal with it. So I really feel like we're in two worlds, right? In two realities.
I've always said that what you fight, fights back. That what you love, loves back. And so we're building the positive in a new light because and eventually you'll build over the old, like we've done for thousands of infinite years. We're building over yesterday to new today.
Not with war and fighting and like having to attack the people and you're an idiot. Like, listen, they've been doing this a really long time. Like, and anybody who wants to learn, like, oh, welcome, come to the meeting. It's kind of like, listen, come check it out. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, that's okay too. We can still be friends, right? But that's more what I would see, and we start over. And I'm so impressed with a lot of the young, like this 25 to 35-year-old group of these biohackers, right? These primal living young people, they're all making their communes in Costa Rica and in Colombia. I was just down in Colombia. I'm watching them, like they're like all know how to make money on the internet now, and they're like they just own things. They're like, oh, we started a blue light blocking company. Oh, we started a red light. Oh, I started a peptide company. They're loaded. And they're kind, but they're interested in, like, they're not drinking. They might do a little bit more ayahuasca than I maybe would like them to do, a little bit more mushrooms, but they're really about the heart and the body and consciousness and doing the right thing and being in nature and making love with each other and making babies. Like, it's a very fascinating group that I'm watching rise up. I'm like, it gives me a tremendous amount of hope for what's coming. There's a lot, the homesteading and the bushwhacking. It's all coming back into people are like, I think we need to take a step back from a lot of technology. Now we'll leverage technology, we'll make our money, so we have freedom. So they're seeing freedom of time and connection and community as really important. So I think as we get back to smaller communities of 100 to 200 people again, and we can start really connecting and actually having real relationships, it starts to change everything. And love, as cheesy as it sounds, really is the answer to almost every problem.
And maybe that's the what we want to sort of help and embrace what we're sharing in a way that you don't need brick and mortar anymore. And so many people can do so many things in a homestead and share that globally. And I think those that sort of have gone the dark road will hopefully kind of see some light that we're shining, and they'll be like, wow, that looks kind of cool and interesting. I want to be over there.
Could be. And I'm a firm believer. Like, I've done this a really long time. I used to call them creatures. And my good friend, the Episcopalian priest, Father Troy, in a 3-hour interview I did with him, he called them the soulless. He's like, well, Stephanie, there are humans without souls. And I'm like, I do know that. And I call them creatures, and it would kind of freak me out when I first was dealing with them. I'm like, where's the soul? So after somebody like has a suicide attempt or schizophrenic, the soul will hover above them, but you can always see it, and you can help do soul retrieval and get it. You have to deal with making the body safe so they can be embodied again. I've started seeing way too many humans. There's no soul to be found. I'm like, I don't know what this is, but it's not me. And I asked him about, well, how to help that, what to do. And he's like, wait a minute. You try to help that? I said, well, yeah. He's like, Stephanie, that is way above your pay grade. It is way above mine. That is not for you to do. You need to get them out away from you and deal with it. So there's a lot of soulless going on. And I do think what we've been experiencing for the last 3 years is a battle for the soul. And I do see the zombification of people, the discussion of all these AI implants. That's very concerning for me, manipulating the brain and killing the seat of the soul, right? The pineal gland is probably where everything is coming in, and where the spark of the soul is, and where the light really radiates from, and how the DMT explodes from there, and all the things that happen. And we're seeing that, being destroyed. And I do think a lot of the mRNA injections have done that. And I've had about 20 different practitioners when we were talking about it going, have you noticed something different when you touch these people? And it's like, they're like dead. Like they're not human. What's going on? And I think there's like a soul snatching going on. So I'm interested. This is where I'm at. And I had to tell a lot of my friends, I go, you guys, if they're trying to run a stampede off that cliff, you need to move out of the way. I'm not going to be taken in there. I'm going to step over here. There comes a point you're not going to stop them.
Yeah.
I'll open the door to, this is what's available. If you want to make a sharp left, I'm here. But I've seen too many clinicians really destroy themselves trying to rescue, working harder to save other people than they're willing to work for themselves. I am no longer ever going to do that again. I'm not going to hurt myself to help someone. So there's that fine line. Like, yeah, maybe I think some of them just need to go. And that might be, I've gotten to a certain area of my career. I'm like, that's good. Bye. I don't need more non-player characters here. The soulless can go.
And so enjoy this. And I want us to do this again and dig deeper. Because I think it's a need within all of us. And I know you've been going through life-changing, and we're all, the souls are connecting. There's a lot of soul connection here. And that's the community that I've been seeing. Costa Rica is one great soul connector too, as you say. Yeah. Any last pieces of advice, insights before we go today?
I think, sticking with talking about the soul, if you haven't, just know that your values, the things, to look at what you do, how you spend your time every day, what you really do in real life will show you what you actually care about, not what you think you should care about, not what you like. That's why people don't do resolutions well. I'm like, because you don't care about that.
Yeah.
And we all have different values. If you figure out what your top 3 values really are, you will actually find you are probably exceptionally successful already at fulfilling your values, but you don't think so. People who beat themselves up because they're comparing themselves to someone else they're watching on social media, let's say, or their neighbor or their brother or their uncle or their daddy or whatever, because they're living their values. Your job is not to live their values, it's to live yours. There are some people who have the most incredible and exquisite marriages and family you've ever seen. They are the envy of everyone around them, but they don't know that. They're stuck on they don't have a Mercedes. They don't have as much money as their brother makes, right? Yeah. So they feel like a failure, but they don't see that they're already winning. So I'm a huge fan of figuring out, what is your soul? What did you come here to do? And those are just the values that are there. And typically your values came from some missing hole inside of you. Okay. So freedom was one of my top 3 values my whole life until a couple of years ago. Imagine why, so that would drive me over love was freedom, right? Yeah. I've made a switch. Now love is more important to me. But if you look at that, you'll see what you're doing. You'll see your values. You should evaluate how you're winning, because that's what your soul is aching for you to pay attention to. Like, you're doing a great job. And if you look and you go, this is what's uncomfortable in my life, it's like, most likely is because you've taken on someone else's value, someone else's meaning for what your life is supposed to be, instead of listening to your soul. So I'm a huge fan of being quiet out in nature. People get really freaked out by the word meditate. Just go be quiet. Just go sit by some trees. They won't make fun of you. They won't talk back. Start talking to a tree. Start talking to the grass. Talk to the stream. talk to God in the sky, whatever works for you, and see what starts to happen when you're in nature and it's entraining your brain into an alpha theta state, depending on where you are. And you'll open up to hearing yourself, your higher self, your soul in a different way, and start following those nudges. And as you follow the soul's path and your highest values and what you really care about, stop wasting your time on things that are really unimportant to you, really unimportant. Your physical ailments will go away.
Yeah.
Because the physical ailments are an expression of your soul trying to scream through to you to pay attention to what it's trying to do.
And would you say that eating meat is important for health and wellness?
I don't see how a human avatar in this construct can be healthy without eating primarily meat. Yes. I won't accept any vegans in my practice or vegetarians anymore. It's way too hard.
Well, I feel very honored to be able to get a chance to speak with you today, and much love. I hope we can continue the conversation and talk more about the glycobiome and deuterium depletion.
Yes, that would be amazing, because it does not get enough attention, and to be able to try to do it in a way that people can understand, and then they can care and just make a few action steps. Because I know the science can get overwhelmed. Like, listen, just do these things. You know what I mean? To help them, because that's what I really feel like there's a lot of damage there that nobody knows about, and it's easier to correct than they think. And it would take away the addiction to supplements and quick fixes, I think.
I feel very honored.
You're so sweet. Listen, it's my honor. I'm a little bit fangirling.
Well, again, when I first saw and listened to you, it's just one of those things. I don't know what I was, and I was like, oh my God, someone talks about this stuff. But again, your energy and your healing power, but your care and love. And again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.